Yeah, I thought it was the sun. My name is Lina Gonzalez-Granados. I'm very happy to be here with this amount of talent combined. I'm very happy. I'm not gonna say too much. I'm gonna be brief on my opening remarks. So I give the space appropriately for these amazing people, and I want you to get to know them. Thank you for coming to our panel, Passing the Baton. I'm joined here by this group of people to allow them to share their experiences working in the orchestra industry and to explore how we can continue to expand access and inspire change in this business. I told you I don't want to be like too long per this, but I did want to start this panel off with a thought. We often associate certain roles with conductors, leader, the physical figure of the organization, a bridge to the community, curator, sometimes healer, shaman for whoever, like psychology for the troubled musicians and organizations. We tend to be everything, everywhere, all at once. But what is missing from these titles is the fact that they require investment and collaboration from these constituencies that the conductor interacts at every stage of our careers, every stage. Being the visible figure of the organization requires that the organization support you and advance your work. Being a bridge of the community assumes that there will be a community waiting for you when you reach to the other side. All is this to say that the work of elevating and advancing is a team sport. It requires a buy-in from every corner of the industry and community to move us collectively forward. And on that note, I wanted to start this conversation. As you know, with all these panels, we just met, months in advance. We talked through our lives. And the one thing that struck me in these conversations is the origin of our careers and how different they look, how they develop in order to arrive where we are in this particular moment. In my case, I actually didn't start as an orchestral conductor, even though that was my purpose of what I wanted to do. I never got accepted into a master's in orchestral conducting. I went to wind ensemble conducting to just try to get, mentorship. Then I went to choral conducting. Like whoever wanted to teach me, that's where I was. And then I finished and came back to orchestral conducting, and I'm here fulfilling my purpose. I wanted to give the space first to Leslie and to all of you to hear your particular experience in life and how did you arrive to being the conductor that you are today?
Hello, thank you, Lina, and good morning to everyone. The career path for me has been somewhat circuitous. It began musically. I'll start with that. The high school, the LaGuardia High School, which was originally two different buildings, the High School of Music and Art and the High School of Performing Arts. They are now combined at Lincoln Center. But back then, one was in Harlem in the middle of the City College campus, and the other one was downtown in the theater district. The one that was in the middle of the college campus, City College, was important for me. I'm a clarinetist, I still play. One of my colleagues is here, and we've played together recently, just this week. And I have another performance coming up next week on clarinet. But my family felt that that was not really a viable profession. They felt that I had aptitude. The New York High School of Bronx Science was a school that I was accepted at, but I decided to go to the High School of Music and Art because I thought that was important for me. But my family didn't agree, and there was a lot of pressure. So for college, I ended up starting out as an optical engineering major with an emphasis in laser energetics. So I did that for 2 years, and then pivoted to a music major in performance, but this was at the Eastman School, the University of Rochester. The university said I needed to start again as a freshman because I didn't have 8 terms of applied music lessons. That didn't agree with me very well, so I decided to get a BA rather than a BM. And when I left there, I went back to New York and wanted to take courses with a man named Leo Craft, who was a great theorist to me. And he gave a lecture for graduate students at Eastman. I had a graduate teaching assistantship, even though I was an undergraduate, and not an Eastman student. So I was not very popular at Eastman. But I spoke with him, and he said, There, there are courses that I'm teaching, there are courses I'm not teaching. The course that you want to take, I'm not teaching. And I asked if I could teach it to undergraduates, and he said, sure. It was a course in extended performance techniques for musicians. And that involved me conducting my students. And so at that point, I decided I wanted to do a master. I was working on my master's. And I decided to do another master's in conducting. And while at the University of Cincinnati, CCM, the Cincinnati Conservatory, I felt that that was not giving me the kind of background that I needed. I learned that they were accredited for a doctoral degree but didn't have a program, so I designed a program. That program is still in force now. Mark Gibson is the person who runs it. It's a very, very good program. While I was there, there was a college conference, the College Music Society. My teacher was Jherrard Samuel, and he had me conduct for that. There were some people from Carleton College who saw me and invited me to apply for a position there, so I started teaching straight out of school at Carleton College. And while I was there, I learned about a competition overseas, the Toscanini competition, so I went over for that and did well. I was the first American to win a prize there. Ooh. And when I came back, the Dance Theater of Harlem asked if I would fill in at the last minute to replace their music director who had just had a heart attack for their upcoming tour. First performance was a disaster, but the critics didn't come until the second performance, and the second performance was great. What happened, I was in Italy for this competition, the Toscanini, and I went to see the Dance Theater of Harlem in Verona, and I went up to the artistic director and said, I'd love to conduct for your company, because I did some conducting with dancers when I was working on my doctorate at CCM, and he literally said, don't call us, we'll call you, and he turned and walked away. And I gave one of the dancers my card. And the next week, I was called in Italy, and it was Arthur Mitchell, and he said, we need a conductor, we're doing Giselle in a week, can you do it? And I said, sure. Sure is a great answer for everything. It's not committed to yes, it's not committed to no. And I hung up the phone, I called my mom and said, Mom, there's this ballet, it's called Giselle, G-I-S-S-E-L, G-I-S-E-L-L-E, something like that. See if you can find a video. I've got to learn it to conduct it in a week. I flew home, watched the video. It's the one ballet that has massive interpretations. Disaster for the first show. The prima ballerina was very gracious and told me the things that I needed to do to help her in particular. And the second show was great. And then they hired me for their next tour, which was South America, Russia, England, Tivoli Festival in Copenhagen, the Salzburg Festival in Vienna, in Salzburg. Then we went to Vienna, to the Tonhalle and Musikverein. It was all of the great capitals in Europe, the Châtelet in Paris, and I conducted in all of them. And that launched the dancing side of my career. While I was doing that, I received a call from the Detroit Symphony because I had done a lot of the then Symphony Orchestra League conducting master classes, which we will get to. Those are important, even though it's now the League of American Orchestras. And I had gone to Tanglewood, and one of my mentors at Tanglewood was Maurice Abravanel, who was a major conductor at the Utah Symphony. And unbeknownst to me, he'd recommended to Detroit that they contact me. I had just come back. They contacted me and said, can you come and audition? I said, well, sure. Yeah. Sure is a great answer. Sure. The audition was 2 days after coming back from tour with Dance Theater of Harlem. I was learning new repertoire for Dance Theater of Harlem. I had to learn new repertoire for this. I thought it will never be successful, but when I have an opportunity to conduct a professional orchestra again? I'll go and do the audition and have fun. They offered me a contract. The third year, the music director said, unless there's something special about you, this is the end, because 3 years is enough for being a staff conductor. They changed music directors. I received a promotion. And that was when I realized that conducting was going to be my life.
That's fantastic. And actually, this pivots very well for the next question that I want to leave it to the two of you. You definitely led a very fascinating work in music, and certainly is less traditional than others. It does have a couple of traditional success stories, like stepping in from the person who has the heart attack, who has the sick person, and then doing amazing. And then the power of networking, which is so important to us, and how every single person help us to path the way. Nevertheless, and also in American orchestras particularly, or no, I'm gonna say Eurocentric, like Europe and America, there are like two traditional ways that they tell you in school that it's the way that you are going to get everywhere. One of them is, okay, you play piano, you become an opera repetiteur. This is very European. You become an opera repetiteur. Maybe you get one opera session and people will like you, and then that one led to another. You will become a conductor of an opera house, and then maybe someone is going to look at you. That is one very long way, but also very fulfilling. Win a competition. Another one, and then the next one is you study, do your master's, then you get an assistantship, then boom, you're ready for music directorship, and you're ready for guest conducting. And you know that we are in a very overcrowded field. Conductors are everywhere. Like you just can go to any corner of the street and there's conductors. You know, and at the same time, opportunities are extremely scarce. You know, so there are two major transitions, and with those transitions into our career and glass ceilings, I call them, and filters that actually are hard. The transition between a school and your first job, and the transition between an assistantship or fellowship now, and going solo and freelance, if that's the case. So I would love to ask both of you, how are you navigating this process while you are still in what I assume is your first major job?
So, you know, this is, I'm kind of very lucky in this situation because for, you know, my job started out, I work with the Rochester Philharmonic and the Rochester Philharmonic Youth Orchestra, and it was a 1-year contract that they offered at the very beginning, and I was able to actually extend it for 3 more years, which is great, so I'll be there till through 2027. Yes, so I have a little bit of stability for now to, you know, focus on what I've found to be the most important part, was just, you know, continuing to try and find opportunities to learn and grow. It's one thing to kind of sit in the hall and observe all these conductors coming through and see how the orchestra responds to them, how they respond to certain things, how they respond to you when you're up there in the same weeks that they are, because you get the one rehearsal at the very end of the week before you have the family concert that weekend.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
So you know, navigating those situations, it was very interesting because there was, like you said, the transition between graduate school and your first job is always the most interesting one, whether or not that's seamless or whether or not there's a gap in between. I actually took 1 year to go out and study with one of my dearest mentors, Kevin No, in Kansas City, and the reaction was, "Are you sure you want to go out into the middle of the country after you were just in New York City and living," you know? And so I was like, yeah, there's a lot that I really want to focus on, and I also was in a fellowship program at that point with the Chicago Sinfonietta, and it was that, both of those things combined, that actually allowed me to discover a lot about what I believed in terms of leadership, in terms of the kind of work that I wanted to do, that I think made things a lot clearer for the jobs that I would apply to that year, and ultimately ended up getting, which was really nice. At this point, I am still, you know, always looking at all the master classes that are out there and all of the other, you know, openings as well, because I don't know that one can sit in this job and just be comfortable. Like you said, they usually give you a shelf life of about 3 years before you go sour.
Yeah, or you can be a perpetual assistant conductor, and that also will speak on a different side of perception in career building wise. But I mean, it's valid, respectful. I'm not saying one is better than the other. We just have to. I think one of the greatest challenge of this is that the most resilient are the ones that, you know, the relentless, the one that stay there even multiple assistant conductorship, multiple fellowships, every job to get to the next level is the one that ultimately stays.
Yeah.
You know, it's about resilience. Thank you. How about you?
Yes, this trajectory from my career was a little bit different and interesting. I started in education. I went to school to be a choral music educator. I wanted to become a conductor through my choir teacher when I was in the 6th grade. I saw she do it, how she did it. I'm like, I want to do that. And so it kind of went through a process of discovering classical music and being a sponge, and then going into high school, performing arts high school. I was the student conductor of my chorale there in my senior year, then going into University of Houston and, you know, studying choral music education. I taught literally for 12 years. And the 6th year into that career, I really, really wanted to be an opera conductor. I was like, I really want to do this. How am I going to do this? And it was literally, well, Gregory, you need to get into orchestral conducting. So figure out a way you can find your way in there. And it was literally asking a friend who was a music director of a volunteer orchestra. And I asked her, can I just be a fly on the wall? And she was like, you can do more than that. You can just be the assistant. And so I became her assistant and did that for 6 seasons. And I covered rehearsals, led performances. I was featured a lot. I mean, so much podium time because we learned by doing. And that's so important, and that experience was invaluable. And, you know, Dominique Royam, I give her the biggest shout out because she took a chance on me and led and, you know, trusted me with her orchestra. And from there, I went to graduate school for orchestral conducting, and then started to apply for different things. The Colton Fellowship came up, and last year they opened it up for conductors, and I didn't get the job. I was like runner-up, and I was a little bit bummed, but things happen for a reason, and things happen in their own time. And then through networking, I saw that Shenjiang was conducting Houston Symphony. I went backstage area, tried to see if I can find her and say hello. She saw me. She's like, oh my goodness, I remember you. You should apply again because the fellowship recipient this past season received a job in Utah. So there's an opening. And usually that fellowship is about 2 years or so. And so I'll say, okay, then I'll try again. And I tried and got it. And so it was just really a cool, you know, things manifest in so many different ways. And I just, you know, you have to be so flexible in this career. Flexibility is the key.
I love your story because your story is very similar to mine. I actually was runner-up for 2 jobs, one in Philadelphia and one in Seattle. And those jobs, they gave me fellowships. And I think that too, because I did it at the same time, was what made my career what it is. You know, and I was number 2, but it was my lucky number 2. It hasn't been, I mean, the best jobs. Kudos to that. And with that, I want to actually connect both of your thoughts about the power of support and mentorship. You know, in this career, at least I feel that I'm the product of the people who have supported me, both institutions and conducting mentors. I want to say Marin Alsop and Yannick, and I want to say the biggest mentor that I had was Branwell Toby, who passed away. But to this day, I get calls from gigs that he had recommended me before he died. You know, so 3 years out, he was just putting, like, I'm still getting gigs, which for me, and he always said that I should do Elgar variations, which he knew that I hated it. Like in school, he's like, she's the best Elgar variations conductor, you should hire her. So every year I do it, and I do it with a lot of love. So really, God bless this guy, because he was really my champion in every way, and he made me love Elgar. So for me, they were so powerful. You know, like they really, not only they helped me with their great advice, but they helped me by connecting me to other mentors and to people. And the best advice I got I think two of them is Maestro Muti told me when he was my assistant, like, don't listen to what's his name, critics. Never read your critics. That's invaluable. The second one is always don't let anyone steer your light. That was Yannick, which is a very luminous, beautiful person. I would love to see from the three of you if you have advice to other conductors and if you have been affected this deeply by the power of your mentors.
Absolutely. It's actually kind of funny because there's so many. You walk past all the tables in the conference hall, and you can't help but think about all the different places you've actually been. So I saw the Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp table, which is where I started conducting and started this passion. And of course, then you run into folks from Interlochen and from schools. And I remember when I got this job in Rochester, the first call I made was to Jung Ho Pak to ask him about his whole philosophy of working with the youth orchestra. And he said, make sure that when the students show up and when they leave, they are coming in with love in their eyes and joys in their heart.
Oh, wow. That's deep.
So if I were to pass any advice off, it would be that. And I, especially for any conductor, we have the power to change someone's day. From the musicians that we work with, the audiences that we inspire, the staff members on the orchestra, you have no idea how one conversation will affect anybody, how one performance that you might feel is craptacular, which is a word that, but it really does, the impact that you have on people is unbelievable, and that has humbled me very much this year, so.
Bravo.
So what was it, 6-7 years ago, Maestro, when you were at Interlochen summer camp, working?
Working, yes.
Yes, about 6-7 years ago, yes?
2019, 2018, yeah.
Yeah, and so he's working in the summer at Interlochen. They have the World Youth Symphony, they have the Interlochen Philharmonic, then they have the Junior Orchestra. So all of the students are busy. Every week they change programs. And yet the students came and played for him. He made his own orchestra with all of that going on with the students at the Interlochen summer camp. So students really are motivated to do lots of things that we may think they're not ready to do. And if they are motivated in the right way, it affects their lives dramatically, as is evidenced here, not just for the students, but for the person who was helping the students. And I find the same thing. When I was with Detroit, we have educational concerts and we had youth concerts. Educational concerts were for the schools, youth concerts were for parents to bring their children. Very different emphasis, very different kinds of programs. And after one of the youth concerts, one of the parents came up to me and said, I'd like you to shake the hand of my child. My child is so motivated and says, Mommy, that person does not look like the other people. Can I do that too? And so I met the child of this parent, and he said, yes, you can do anything you want. You don't have to look like everybody else. The mommy was white, and the child was a white girl who looked at me as a mentor. I had never thought about going across any sort of lines that we have in our particular society. Everything has a positive effect or a negative effect. And we want to try to instill positive effects. Even if we are stern, I had one kid come up to me and said, wow, you'd make a great daddy. You can be mean. So everything has an effect, even in ways that you don't anticipate.
One piece of advice I received pretty much in that realization I really wanted to do this as a career was a particular person that's actually not far from here, Robert France, who's at Windsor. And he was in Houston, and I connected with him through Dominique, the person I was assisting in Fort Bend in South Houston. And I thought, getting into his career, I looked at all of the different biographies. I'm like, I don't fit that. I didn't go there. I'm a singer first. Like, they're gonna respect me. And all these different things. I had all these different limitations that I was putting on myself. And Robert told me, he said, you as a singer, that's probably one of your greatest strengths, because everything is built on the voice. Everything, you know, so we're all striving to sing with our instruments, and so use that as your biggest strength. So something you may think may hinder you, but it will actually be the thing that will strengthen you. And so that is what I took that advice and really started to find my way and really into this career, and did so many cool things and was a part of a lot of great things, even at the small regional level. Literally, I did my first opera. It was Dialogues of the Carmelites, and it was Friends. It was a family and friends performance. The lady who taught me voice in high school was in the chorus. My best friend was Madame Ledouin, and we did this chamber. We were just crazy and having fun, and that was the thing that I took from that, and from there just kept going. Something I thought that was impossible became possible. So, you know, those words really they hit.
Amazing. I want to pivot from the positive light that we are emanating here a little bit and going a little more filterless with this question. You feel free to answer the way that you want. I think it's important also that you know that we have challenges that we face at all times, you know. Sometimes it's looking for a manager that helps you build your career the right way. Sometimes on a deeper level, on a more basic level, the ability to get, even in the highest, I think more difficult getting a decent video to show your, like after getting to school, you know, decent video, podium time, that it has quality time. This is a more like conducting centric question. On a personal note, I envision this panel. Also, this is talking on a different challenging, a panel that also has women in it. You know, so we have all of these challenges that are still constantly showing up in our profession. In my opinion, very honest, the pandemic did open a sort of opportunities to do things that were like more risque, but now we're coming back to contracting to what was safe, which will leave us behind if we're not careful, and that's why we're here. So I want you to be honest and tell me if you feel that there are challenges coming your way, or that you have felt it. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Nobody wants to answer this.
I mean, for the challenges for me is that right now I'm in the part of my life where I'm married, I maybe want to start a family, and right now I'm in my career, however, is very much on a youthful level, you know, starting out again. And so these two things are quite challenging for me. And so, you know, do I want to be a conductor that wants to travel every single place or live on a plane? You know, that's a challenge, something that I have to think about. I'm my own manager. You know, my partner is very good at, you know, helping me out and you know, speaking to other folks to me as well. He's kind of like my manager as well. But, you know, for me, I'm my own, you know, social media person. It's a lot of things that's on me that I have to do. You have to create a profile. You know, there was a session earlier about creating a profile. You know, then through the networking, I remember I applied for a particular assistantship, and I was told, like, you have great video, those are great, but you don't have a profile. You know, you didn't go to this school, or you didn't have a teacher, you know, that's a good, respectable name. And he was very frank with me, and I'm glad he was, you know, but at the same time, it was just like, wow, this is where we're at. And this is not long ago. This is very recent. So, you know, but at the same time, you have to keep pushing forward. You have to find other ways, other avenues to rise above those different challenges. Again, I don't know, if there was a challenge, I didn't maybe perceive it as such, and I just kind of went around that way. I've always been persistent.
And that's why we're here, but at the same time, do we always have to be listening to a management or to an artistic administrator saying, oh, I need to hear more of you, I need to look, like, you need to look more? It's like, what else can I do? but like being me all the time, being there, you know, it's so hard. We have 5 minutes, so I would like for the two of you to do this, and because I have one more question, very short.
Yeah, I think, I think when you overcome the first challenge of just figuring out who you are as a musician, I think the next thing is just to figure out, how and where and who you want to work with and how you're going to even get there. I think there's a lot of pressure, especially as an early career conductor. You say yes to basically everything. So at this very moment, from saying yes to everything, have 4 orchestras that are simultaneously on my radar. All of Rochester, New York, I'm working with at the moment, because I just took on a role at the Eastman School, working with both the orchestras there, preparing them for their guest conductors, but also conducting a couple concerts, and occasionally working with the graduate students, on top of my work with the RPO and RPYO. And there's the question of sleep.
Yes, balance is hard. We have to just say yes to everything, and this I feel like this is very unique to the people that we represent. The stakes are so high, and the opportunities are even more scarce, that we just have to say yes to everything, even if we're not ready to, because there will be no other opportunity.
Yes, there are basically 2 ways when you're starting out the career that you can choose for trying to get to that stage of having management. One is to go to lots of national conferences where there are managers there so that they get to see and meet your name, literally your name, and hopefully remember you after a number of times having contact. Or you can have management contact you. That is rare these days. I am from a different generation from my colleagues on the panel here. I was fortunate and unfortunate, both simultaneously. I was fortunate in that there were a number of managements that were interested in me. I was unfortunate in that it was important for the managers to from their perspective, to see me as a specific type of conductor. And I had no interest in being a specific type of conductor. My interest was being a conductor. So virtually all of the managements were not interested in me. There was one who I worked out a partnership with, and he was my manager for well over a decade, Tom Parker. I stopped with management with Tom when my parents became ill and I became a full-time caregiver for a number of years. So at that point I was not conducting. But while I was with Parker Artists, I also had contact from a management in Europe. That started to make contacts because I was also conducting in London a lot. I was working with the Royal Ballet at Covent Garden and the Birmingham Royal Ballet. Because I was doing a lot of touring, I had an opportunity to meet lots of people. But once you leave the field, as I did when I became a full-time caregiver, as you were saying, it is very difficult to get back into the field. I was out for quite a number of years. And so my interests, because they were varied before conducting, optical engineering, I did a lot of volunteer work here in the United States and in different countries in Africa for different kinds of programs. But none of the volunteer work had anything to do with music. That was my prerequisite. If I'm going to do volunteer work, it's going to be in other areas that are either humanitarian or environmental, because those are important aspects of life. And those are now important aspects of life for making music. And as we move forward, we have to be much more socially conscious. That is going to make a big difference in helping to galvanize careers of young conductors, knowing what can be done in those areas. Because when you can address those areas, boards and constituent groups are going to be interested in what it is that you want to do.
It's so good because this pivots to like the 2 last questions that I will ask them both simultaneously. It's very fascinating, the life that you lead, Leslie, and I'm so inspired by every word that you have said in this panel. Outside of your job, do you have any other forms of fulfillment? Like, do you enjoy something that sparks joy that you can bring outside your job? Question 1. And the second one, because we talk about tokenism, this could be a panel in itself, and the amount of the restriction of the time that we have for this amount of music that is unknown is extremely problematic in every single way, and how we need to be perceived or how people want us to be. because we don't, like, that's not our choice. I want you to talk to me, give me 2 composers from the canon, not outside the canon, that you feel that you could champion, or no, that you feel that you will be able to champion to any of the members here of, of the orchestra, like any other of your peers.
Sure, I'll start with the first question and then I'll answer the second question in 2 parts. The first question was with regard to interests outside of conducting and music. I found that doing volunteer work became a passion when I was doing it, and it is important for me that it has nothing to do with music. So I've worked in pharmacy when I was in Zimbabwe. I was working in a safari park, lion rehabilitation. I worked on a shark cage diving boat. I became very involved in fair trade in Chicago and actually helped to launch a store that is now in its 16th year. It's been very successful. Along the line, it's one of the franchises of 10,000 Villages. There was not one where I lived in Chicago. And so I helped to spearhead that after doing one of my world tours. To the second part, there are the 2 composers who I am really interested in trying to promote is Adolphus Hailstork, who has been the main force in my life as the Dean of Black Composers, and Jesse Montgomery, who I think is one of the, well, 2, Jesse Montgomery and Valerie Coleman, who are the leading composers right now, and the third for me would be Carlos Simon. Not of any particular canon or race.
But how amazing is that we hear these names as part of the canon? Because my question was, who are the 2 composers that you want? For me, it's Gabriela Frank also, and Revueltas, and for me, that's my canon. So this is important answers here. Before we go on the Q&A, the 2 of you, please, flash question.
Flash question. Things that bring me joy: my cat, my husband, and
yes.
my practice of my religious practice, and then what composer Julia Perry. I really love her music. We need more of her. I did her Stabat Mater, and it was life-changing. And then I need to give a shout out to Dave Ragland, I did a piece of his last season, so yes.
Things that bring me joy, and it's only because she's here and I have to embarrass her, but I kid you not, there are, twice, maybe 3 times weekly phone calls that I have with my mom that are, they keep me very sane, and and other than that, it's food. Look, you find me a good steak at a good cocktail bar, I'm a very happy man. 2 composers in the canon. You stole Valerie Coleman, and I'm very mad about that right now.
No, but we can all love Valerie Coleman.
That is true. That is true.
The more people that they play their music, the better.
Yeah, and so
this is not a hugging competition.
Okay, well, we'll fight over it later. But I seriously. William Grant Still is my guy, and I all of the symphonies, so many of the concert works, I could step up at 4 a.m. and someone asked me a question about something, and that would be my guy.
Oh wow, that's a flex.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes, of course.
So when he mentions William Grant Still, I just wanted to mention that this is important because he is the father of African-American Black composers from almost 100 years ago. And when I revived Troubled Island in Chicago in 2013, that led to a lot of other things. So I am now, in addition to a symphonic and ballet conductor, I am now an opera conductor. I was told in school I would never work in opera and I would never work in ballet because I have 0 piano skills. I try to hit an A and I get 3 notes. I have 0 piano skills. My students at Interlochen tell me, can we help you? I have no piano skills. But doing that work led to my conducting the Central Park 5, which ultimately won the Pulitzer. So these things can lead forward.
Aren't we lucky to have both past, I wouldn't say past, this troubles me. They were like passing the baton, past, present, future, but the present looks like this. The present looks like people in different stages of our careers that we still want to do our job at the highest skill. And my dream for the next panel of passing the baton really is that all the things that we face, hopefully they get easier for everyone. If we actually suffer through this, I hope it's easier for all of you that if you're conducting here or conducting students or aspiring to follow this career, that really the path that we've been carving, curves, mountains, whatever it is, that you still have it easier. And with that, we would be opening to a Q&A if you want to. I think it's gonna be here still. Oh, awesome.
Good morning. My name is Tyler Rand. I'm Chief of Staff at the Boston Symphony, Tanglewood, Boston Pops. You've talked a lot about mentorship and managers and artistic administrators. I would really love to hear, maybe from each of you, the way that you approach building a rapport with the players in the very limited time that you have. Maybe the first time you're with an orchestra, you get up on the podium. There's a lot of the time they're strangers. And they are some of the most critical voices in determining the future of opportunities that you might have with that ensemble, with other ensembles. How do you approach that? Maybe how has that changed through your career, and what advice might you have for younger conductors who are in that position?
I'll start. Very simply, I was told by a wonderful teacher of mine, David Robertson, who, he caught me at probably one of my lowest points of, personally and emotionally. And he was like, everyone already knows that you're a sweet person. You can just get to work. and so from that, I've kind of had to just shut off the part of my brain that, you stand in front of the orchestra, you see all of the reactions. If someone, misses a note or does something and they, feel bad at themselves, but they roll their eyes or they like cross their legs or something, you catch all of this on the box. And you have to say, okay, yep, sure, whatever. Either that was my mistake and I'll fix it, or, something else happened. But, just being able to find a way to just come in and know that you're there to do what you have to do. And ultimately, you're not there to cause anybody any harm, and hopefully make some gorgeous music along the way. I think that's been what's led to a lot of really good success.
When I teach conducting at Interlochen, the first thing I have all of my students do is two things. They do one thing in two different ways. The first is to walk to the podium in a manner, without saying anything, in a manner that they feel is not going to garner the kind of response from the musicians or the singers that they want. And the second is to walk to the podium in a manner that they think will garner the kind of response that they want. So that immediately they know that as soon as you walk, a decision has been made about you. Because
Absolutely.
The decision is made before you reach the podium as a young conductor.
Before your first downbeat.
The second thing is to just be true to yourself, to the music, and what your goal is. And if you're true to that, the musicians will respect you. And you have to respect them.
Literally what he just said. I was going to say the exact same thing. And just to add that you have to have a sense of just having that sense of calm and really shutting off, the noise. There's a lot of noise that happens. And I learned this recently from another great conductor. He's like, just shut off the noise, focus on the music, and go.
May I just add something? I know that I'm a panelist, but I want to have a little different perspective here. Every orchestra is so different, right? Sometimes, and I'm gonna be extremely candid here, it depends of the culture of the city as well, and how they perceive women, how they perceive people of color. That already is also a complicated thing that makes the opinions, and also because they're anonymous sometimes in the feedback, very biased. So sometimes you just have, you just don't stand a chance, and you know it from the minute that you arrived. Like it is that way, and you just know that it's gonna be one of those weeks, and you're gonna charge very proudly your check and move on. And with that saying, is that for me, at least, I have the privilege to have great musician friends that are in good orchestras that I can go and reach out when I need advice and feedback. And I think I'm the worst critic and the best critic of myself. I'm very honest, and I say, this sucked. I really know that this wasn't the thing. And then I can go to my friends and say, hey, can you see this and see if this works? But it has to be coming from a place of trust, because not every feedback is useful. This is the problem. It's so subjective that sometimes you just know that you're never gonna go back, and it doesn't matter. What it matters is that we move on, and we move on growing. Make sense?
I do want to get the question with regard, it's relating this to something that was said earlier, and that is with, forgive the term, but ghettoizing programs, so that programs have a specific content in terms of the music and the type of audience that is being targeted. When I was here in Detroit, I was asked to do a gospel concert once I received my promotion. In the first year I was asked, I said no. The second year I was asked to do a gospel concert, and I said no. The third year I was asked to do a gospel concert, and I said no. The fourth year I was asked, I said yes. And the artistic administrator said, well, what's different about this year? And I said, well, I learned something about gospel music. And she said, well, why couldn't you do it before? And I said, well, why couldn't you? And she said, well, I didn't grow up with that kind of music. And I said, well, neither did I. She said, she said, well, what did you grow up with? I said, it doesn't matter what I grew up with. I had to learn gospel music, the essence of gospel music, the same way I learned Mozart and the same way I learned Rachmaninoff. It does not, it is not something that should get
Fantastic,
anything less.
yes.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for this panel. This has been fantastic. My name is Juan Flores. I'm a student conductor. I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in orchestral conducting. And I wanted to ask about this gap that you have addressed in terms of, this weird space between school and your first position. And I find that as I approach that gap, there's some anxiety, there may be some fear and some doubt. And I was curious as to how, maybe during this time for each of you, but also just throughout your careers, how you have addressed these moments of doubt, of uncertainty, and kind of stayed mentally strong. And if that has affected your musicianship in some way, and maybe there's a bounce back with that.
So, after graduating from my grad program at Juilliard, I moved to Kansas City, and I kid you not, I lived there. I was doing my fellowship with the Chicago Sinfonietta, and it was called to do some covering and some prep conducting as well. But throughout the year, I was working at a mini golf bar called Sinker's Lounge. It's quite good. If you're ever in Kansas City, I highly recommend you check it out. No one that I know still works there, so I can't promise you any deals. But it was because of a conversation that I had with my teacher the year prior when I was a second-year student, that I had absolutely no fears in my mind whatsoever about the fact that I was still a conductor, because it was like, just because you don't have a date, on your calendar 7 years from now or 6 or 5 or next year, does that mean you're any less of an artist? And I know the second year struggle is very scary, and you can think, okay, if there's nothing lined up right now, then am I even an artist anymore? Essentially, it just comes to ask the question, what are you willing to do at that moment to make sure that you're artistically fed, you're still growing, and you're seeking out the opportunities you can. And while you're doing it, if you're working somewhere else, if you're doing something else, if you're volunteering, it doesn't matter.
Yes, to elucidate and pick up on that, my students sometimes do ask specifically about burnout at the high school age, because already they're feeling burnout as they're applying for college. It's important for us to be well-rounded human beings, and if we become well-rounded human beings, there is always something in life that can motivate you. It doesn't have to be your career or your job or your purpose that you see in terms of your long line vision. As long as you find things that you find that motivate you to wake up every day, then those are the things that keep you going until the passion comes back when you're feeling that self-doubt. There was a man, when I was in Namibia, I was doing some volunteer work. It had nothing to do with music, and he had huge problems. He had AIDS, his mother had AIDS. The university where he had studied had stolen his artwork and had actually placed his artwork on the university walls and then refused to admit him to the university for getting some sort of compensation. And he said something to me that I have never forgotten. He said, every day, find something that makes you smile before you go to bed. Think about it. And when you wake up in the morning, you know that the last thing you thought about the previous night made you smile, so that there's always something to look forward to.
I followed up with that. That's a great sound advice. I know we were pressed for time, but really just literally, for me, during that gap year, I found other projects to do. I cold called. I was a chorus master for a local opera company, like a region company that was like down the street from me. And so I did that, and then I also taught. And so I just kind of kept that going and just kind of hold on to my why. Because there are many times I was like, I can't do this. It's not going to happen. Just frustrated and tired and just, why did I go through all this for, And someone reminds me, what is your why? What is something that you do so well? And you hold on to that and you expound on that and you grab on, that kind of penetrates your life, and how does it keeps you going, just like that why.
On that, I do remember in school, one of my friends after school said, why do you continue to try to make a career of this? It's clearly not going to happen for you. Why are you doing this? And I said, well, my parents instilled in me this belief that if there's something you want to do, you work at it until you achieve it. They didn't say you work at it until you get tired, you work at it until someone discourages you. You work at it until you achieve what your goal is. Now that goal can be on various degrees of station with regard to how you view it or how the world views it. But as long as you feel fulfilled, then you've succeeded.
I just have one. For me, yes, continuous burnout, especially in those transitions because of the green card. Before I was an American citizen, so that if you are not an international student, that adds a little bit of anxiety to to the mix that is completely different. For me, the only way to not stop is because I didn't know what else to do. I really didn't. I mean, not that I was useless, but I was just like, what else am I going to work if it's not a conducting? I just have to try it. So in practical terms, I just had to do it. Anything, competitions, for my ensemble, make albums, whatever it is, that was the only thing I did.
I have a quick question. Leslie and I go way back. I'm a freelance trumpet player in New York City, and we did Firebird with Dance Theater of Harlem many years ago, so it's great to see you. My question is, I now conduct. So I conducted Hartford Symphony, Springfield, and at NYU. I have yet to conduct an orchestra of people I don't know. What is your advice to me when I finally get in front of an orchestra where I don't know anybody? What do I do? And if you conduct overseas, like in Germany or Austria, do you know the language? Like, how do you get beyond those two things?
The first is, again, that walk that you do from the wings to the podium is where you garner yourself, so that when you reach the podium, the musicians already have a sense of who you are. Once they have a sense of who you are and that they believe that you are there for a reason, it will be fine. You work, different orchestras, you work the way you want to work. People have asked me, how do I work differently between professionals and students? And my response is, my approach is the same. My expectation is the same. My reactions to things may be different, but the approach and the goal are the same. To make good music based on the research that I've done and how I want to impart what I've learned from the research from my personal experience. So that will give you the confidence to do whatever it is you need to do on the podium, no matter whether you know the people or not. Really, there's no impact whatsoever. The second part of that, what was that? Germany, Austria. Language. I try to learn the basic phrases for every language where I conduct, even if it's just hello or thank you or goodbye. Conducting in South Africa, my manager had called me when I was working at Covent Garden and said, South Africa's just contacted me and want to know where to send the Kumalo. And I said, find out what a Kumalo is. What is a Kumalo? And so my manager called me back and said, Kumalo is apparently the composer whose work you're conducting. And I said, I'm doing a heightened mass. And he said, apparently not.
Wow.
And a week later, I was in South Africa, and I said, can someone teach me a little bit of Zulu so I know what the language sounds like? I've never heard Zulu. It's not a European language. And so they told, Zulu has clicks in the language. They are represented by different letters of the alphabet. Like the Nelson Mandela is actually Xhosa. He's not Zulu. So Xhosa, I can't do it now. Xhosa, there we go, Xhosa. It's not easy to be able to do that. I suddenly had 200 people in the chorus for my first rehearsal, and they're doing this one aria, this one choral number, where they're all singing clicks, like Miriam Makeba, who I also met when I was over there. And I literally stopped conducting because it sounded like thunder was coming at me. It was overwhelming. But then I learned how to say in Afrikaans, Baya Danki, for those who are not Zulu. No, thank you very much. And I learned a few words, Sawubona, Yebo. Those are the basic words, a little bit of, when I was in Kenya, a little bit of Kiswahili. If you learn a few basic words, like just saying Tera, hello in Estonian, immediately the musicians say, he cares enough to try to learn something from my language and my culture. I like this person.
Yes, but can I say something? Not about that. I like this person, I love it. When you guest conduct a lot, especially like in Europe, a lot of people are polyglots and they speak every language. So for me, my first rehearsal, and also if it's how would I say, like a level A orchestra, my first rehearsal will always be, I want to know how they interact with each other, how they sound each other. So I let them play a lot, like for a very big chunk before I can interject, because I want to hear, it's about how you read the room, how they listen to each other, how behind the beat it is. Every orchestra is so different in that sense. And the second thing is that the first question that a musician asks will say everything about the orchestra. For example, it's my experience that here in America, people like more, I would say, florid ideas. You know, so you want to say, you want to say, let's keep this on the center side of the pitch, which says you're out of tune, you know? Like, let's keep this on the center side of the pitch, or just like keep the brightness down, just cover it up, you know? There's places in Finland, out of tune or not out of tune? Out of tune, okay, tune, you know? So the first question will always tell you what they react to. And then you start playing the game.
And then you let them go early.
And then you let them go early for the beers. Yeah, exactly. Not really. No, so, like, you know, it's hard. In Europe, it's so many rehearsal time that you're like, it's fantastic, thank you very much. It's like, well, what else? You know, we have 10,000 more rehearsals. And then here is like, there's just 1 hour for 3 hours of music. Then you go, you know, it's like, so just like reading the room every time. It's what is not said, where everybody is staying, you know. The words that nobody says is where we live, actually. Thank you very much. I think, I hope you enjoy this. I hope there is something that we can build upon. And thank you to all three of you for this beautiful thing. Thank you.